You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Data Center Therapy, a podcast from IVOXY Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt Coffee as Code Yeti, and alongside me is my co-host, Matt Cozzolino.
Can I script that?
In each episode, we dive into the wide range of technologies that make up this beautiful sandbox called IT that we all play in. We share our hopes and dreams, opinions both positive and critical alike, all with a touch of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all need a seat on that couch. Okay, Mr. Cozzolino, I am happy to have just the two of us back so we can go back to our normal fighting round 4, debates, all that and that. But really, what we've been doing at IVOXY lately, besides trying to keep our head above water with this crazy start to 2020.
Everything.
It's been crazy. One thing on our list at IVOXY is our lab, our internal lab.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done trainings, education, curriculum, and a lot of it has been centered around this lab that we run internally. And given that we try to be as lean as possible, we don't have a dedicated team that works on this lab. We work on the lab kind of thing. The questions arise. Hey,
always
what
a
happens?
hard thing.
Yeah, what happens when something goes wrong? What happens when something fails? And in this case, what happens when you have aging hardware that needs to be replaced?
Mm-hmm. Who carries that pager?
Right.
How do we life cycle it? Right?
Yeah, and it's not me. Thumb rule. I do not carry that pager. So we've had a lot of discussions internally, and we are going to be rebuilding the lab fresh with new equipment and go from there. And now, what do we layer on top of the lab? Are we going to build it out the same old traditional way? Are we going to try to eat our own dog food, so to speak, practice what we preach? And
I think that's the best way to do it, right? If we're going to do this, we might as well do it like we're recommending.
And I think there's no bigger drum beater in that topic than you, Matt. And I will admit that I am fully on board in that case as well, because I embrace things when I see them in action and how they can be better. If you just list me a bunch of bullet points that say this is what's cool and new in this version, it doesn't, that doesn't absorb with me too well. So I'm excited for this endeavor, but you really had some real world experience and traction with this this concept, right? With a customer of ours recently.
Yeah. So
what was that project like? I mean, I wrote it. So
you wrote it. It was interesting to see how much time gets presented to, like, here's this body of work, we're going to do this thing, it should take a couple of days, and then you actually get into it, and we don't write code. I don't write code all day long. I'm not a computer scientist coder. I'm I'm an operational guy. I run infrastructure and I make the things work. So going into this project and doing a lot of scripting, a lot of coding to make everything work was a surprising amount of time commitment that I wasn't quite prepared for.
Well, to that point, I have two questions. Mm-hmm. One, is the majority of the quote unquote scripting you're doing, is it actual scripting, or is it formatting language files like YAML, XML, JSON? I mean, it seems like there's an awful lot of that to be done.
Right. So there's kind of two pieces to approach, right? You talk to network guys and it's always Python that they come back to. And if you're going to write Python scripts and you're going to work with those things, you're going to ingest data, you're going to use a table, you're going to use some variables, and you're going to process that and use your regex and all this fun stuff. And it's going to be if, then, do, this, that, the other thing, right? Compared to some of the infrastructure as code, that's not the right one. Kind of manageability of environments. So like using Ansible, using Chef, Puppet, where you declare a thing and say this needs to be installed. This bit needs to be installed, and then just let the system deal with it.
Those installer bits are already pre-built for you.
Yeah, it's already there, and you just have to go tell the system to do it, right? So there's a little bit of a coding scripting difference between the two of them. So, for example, that's what the project was a lot of how do I make all of these settings configured, and I chose to use Ansible so that we could repeat that process. We find that a lot of the documentation I'm running from doesn't flow from a logical point of view. So like update apt is step 3. And then make sure all of these things are installed is step 7. I'm
Yeah,
like,
when you're looking at security standards, they're not
Mhm.
concerned with the procedural nature
Right.
of it. They just say this has to happen. Don't care how you do it.
So yeah, it was interesting going through all of the code and seeing that, and then collapsing a bunch of the things. So these 7 apps need to be installed. These 6 templates need to be deployed. Can all be done with a single statement, right? So a lot of the initial build is just getting it to work, and then a lot of the second phase through is cleaning that up and making it shorter, smaller, quicker, faster.
So that's what I want to know. So
Mhm.
obviously there was a significant amount of work on the front end of this. Did you find that you were able to get to the point where you could execute this, automation framework,
Mhm.
what have you, and have it apply en masse? Was there a payoff, or did you find that you had I hit that roadblock and I need to tweak this for this little guy, or this special case, where you get enough of those, and it's like, why didn't I just go ahead and brute force this thing from the beginning?
With a number of specific items to check and settings to set, I wouldn't want to do it manually any other way.
Really?
The biggest issue I ran into was I'm running Linux, so I can run Git, I can run Ansible, I can do everything straight from my terminal, right? And then I try to run it on the Windows environment, and I'm source right. So I'm source controlled. I checked everything in. I can just go to that destination machine and pull it down. So that's super cool. Um, but then I spent a whole bunch of time getting just the initial stuff. So making sure the Ubuntu WSL environment so that I could
Yep.
actually run that on the Windows machine, getting that set up took a while.
This throws me back to my days of Cygwin. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Getting that Unix environment
Mhm.
in Windows, and
Mhm.
that worked, but it feels like we're almost just moving laterally from that point on the Windows side of things.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I got a friend of mine that works for Microsoft, so he's always on that bandwagon. But it's surprising, and maybe it's just that I do Linux, I do Mac, I work on those, so I'm comfortable to those roadblocks all the time. So I don't see those speed bumps, I guess. And then you change it to being here. I've got to do the same kind of thing on this Windows box, which really just kind of sits over here as a VM for when I need to like VPN into an environment, right? And then you got to solve those problems on Windows, and it's complicated. You're
Yeah,
not used to it. You're not ready for it.
I've been using Mac on the desktop since or the early OS 10 days.
Yeah.
So we're probably nearing 20 years now, and of course, growing up, I was Windows all the way, right? It just,
yeah,
of
me too.
course. And as a kid, I couldn't afford a Mac, and there's all of
Mhm.
that. And in school, we had both. I would go into like second grade early to play Carmen Sandiego on the Apple IIe at that
I remember
point.
that.
But outside of that, I don't think you made me think. Am I ever sitting here at my Mac saying, I just need a Windows box to run this or to do that? And no.
Surprisingly,
No.
it's VPN.
Um,
I got so many customers with so many different VPN clients.
like
A
what?
bunch of them just only work on the Windows machine. Um, Basically anything that's not like Palo or Cisco.
Like a Junos?
Yeah.
I've had that
Or
run in
SonicWall,
Mac.
or
Huh.
I don't know. It depends, and it might. I've run into it also where it's like the profile isn't there for the client on Mac because they don't have any in their environment. So yeah, it'd work, but it's not stood up and built and tested on their end. So
Huh.
well, fine, I'll just use my Windows box.
Yeah, thankfully I don't have to crack up the virtual machine all that often.
Yeah.
The Windows 10. Yeah, and every time I do, it's always cranky when I wake it up,
Mhm.
and it's like, you're back. So I'm happy to stay in the Mac world.
Mhm.
So in terms of repeatability,
Mhm.
do you see that these scripts you've generated, or at least the framework around them, is something that can be usable not only for this project, but possibly other projects going forward?
I actually, so seeing as I went through, it was security hardening. So seeing as I went through all of the security stuff for Ubuntu 18.04, I intend to start actually deploying that in my environment. And it's super easy to let this script run and see green checkboxes come out from Ansible and say nothing was changed because all of those settings are correct already. And just, throw a bunch more variables at it and have it check 20 more systems.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So you plan on leveraging this for the IVOXY lab?
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens when something breaks and I can't get what I need to done in our lab? And
That question is not just a security hardening or
that's true.
a scripting question. That's going to be, across the board anyway. What happens when a power feed breaks or a fan dies or a hard disk needs replacing, right?
True. And that's
Yeah.
you, right? That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Sure. Why not?
There it is. It's on record. It's on record. Well, yeah, the code discussion is very hot right now.
Mhm.
Myself and a couple of my coworkers had an opportunity to immerse ourselves in another, disaggregated HCI.
Mhm.
It's not technically HCI, but a lot of this compute and storage we're talking underneath, that's almost quote unquote the boring part. I mean, it has to be there, right? Compute and storage.
Mhm.
How it happens is starting to become inconsequential. It's what does it enable you to do above over the top in
Yeah.
terms of the layer, and I mean the big thing, obviously, I don't know if we can go an episode without mentioning it, is containers and Kubernetes, and
Mhm.
I'll tag on to Mr. Taylor's shameless plug that we do have classes coming up in Kirkland and Portland. So contact
Check them out.
contact us if you want to check those out, because that's, I mean, I asked Alec on the last podcast, do you feel like containers are to virtual machines as virtual machines were to bare metal hardware? And he said, he answered with a maybe. I don't know how you feel about that, Matt. What do you, if I put you on the spot, what do you feel?
I think it is from a understanding the environment and understanding what's happening with it point of view. Like the first time I touched a virtual machine, there was this whole idea that wait, all of these things are running all at once, just like I've got Word and Excel running on the same machine. No, not really. That's not how it is. So there's some brain power that you have to apply to that.
I almost feel like, if I'm comparing the two, the concept of a virtual machine was much more, well, the border's better defined, I think, because it's just, oh, my physical server, I'm picking it up, putting it in this virtual bundle, and dropping it onto other hardware. Like, so that was, in my opinion, an easier concept to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, I think the acceleration and the adoption of it was more frictionless. Whereas
the adoption of virtual machines.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could P2V a virtual machine and that's it, and it's running. I know you're shaking your head, and
yeah, but how long had we gone through that process where, hey, I want to deploy this application and the application vendor doesn't support virtualization?
that you're not wrong. But what's funny about it doesn't support virtualization was outside of it maybe requiring a hardware key, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a Quark or whatever, something like that. Outside of that, it was strictly a, hey, we haven't tested it on this yet.
Exactly.
That is way different than containers.
Well...
Oh, Matt, it's a complete re-architecture.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think you like where I'm going.
But from a conceptual point of view, it is, here's this way I've been doing it, and now here's this new way I've been doing it.
It is, but I think that obfuscates the specifics significantly.
Okay.
But so from that standpoint, I think about it. But then here I am at my last job. We didn't virtualize until 2010. I mean, that virtual machine thing was rocking in 2006 and 7, right? So you talk a period of 4 years, which is really not a lot, and it is a ton in IT. You could look at it both ways. So I think you could probably argue in both ways that the virtualization ramp up was significantly long.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like containers are a big maybe paradigm shift in that it's going to take a couple of big dominoes to topple over. A couple of on-premise applications that are so monolithic and ingrained in the corporate environment to kind of go containers only, and then maybe you're looking at a paradigm shift. But I feel like they don't apply to absolutely everyone yet.
No,
small
they
business
don't.
Sam cares less about containers. Probably won't need them for. I don't know what's going to happen to really make it applicable to that scenario.
I'd think that it'd actually be the other way, because of how easy containers are to consume and use. Small shop, one guy running the environment. may have a better time deploying the service quicker, faster, easier with a container than here's these 17 Windows VMs and the SQL database and all of this and all of that versus here's a Docker Compose file.
And I think that is where we're seeing the fire, the embers burning right now in the simplicity of the consumption. Because right now I say, Matt, set up a Kubernetes cluster, and you might say, okay, no problem. Say that to your standard sysadmin, who's just, who could go ahead and stand me up a Windows server with file services or whatever, right? Fine, no problem, great. Say that to somebody who hasn't been following the container track, and it's a much different conversation. I just feel like it's more radical of a change structurally than a P2V was.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are apples and oranges. Those are two totally different things.
That's my point.
I can pick up a machine and I can P2V it, versus if I want to deploy this as a container, the application needs to be written to support it, right? So you're talking about a
I'm talking about self-driving cars.
No,
wonderful concept.
You're talking about Microsoft needs to rewrite Exchange to use containers, and that is not something that we get to deal with.
It's kind of like the promise of a self-driving car.
Okay.
I fear we might always be 95% of the way there. So close, but everybody's got to be on board to really realize the significance and the benefits. And I just feel like a lot more needs to happen for a container to be ready to be deployed versus just, hey, I'm going to convert this virtual machine. I don't care if my vendor knows. Yeah.
Right. I still think that's two different things, though.
That's fair.
Right.
So here's I feel like the point that I was making about the embers in that we're seeing companies like NetApp with their HCI product. The HCI is a little different architecture. They leverage their SolidFire scale-out storage platform for independent scale-out storage and guaranteed performance. That's cool. That's like, from a hardware standpoint, that's the coolest. They have their own compute nodes, but you can also bring your own compute nodes also. You can't obviously get any of that firmware update functionality because if it's not a NetApp piece of hardware, you're not going to be able to manage it however you want. But in terms of bringing them into your cluster, your vSphere cluster, wonderful, which I think is really cool. But that whole platform allows you to, what their aim is for you to treat your on-premise data center as just another cloud target. It just so happens it's private and on-premise, but it's a cloud target. And with a few clicky on a wizard, here's your K8s cluster. Master node, you got multiple worker nodes, and then you can say, okay, I want to deploy this container out of its registry, right? Because it's got a registry. Then their goal is to have everything that's completely compatible with Alpine and all of that,
right,
ready to deploy. And do I want to put that here or do I want to put that there?
Right.
And that's really as hard a decision as it needs to be.
Right. So that's kind of the place, right? It's that difficulty in getting a vSphere environment stood up is now not so difficult because we've done it so much. And now that we've got this vSphere environment stood up, hey, give me that OVA. Hey, let me build a Windows box. Let me install whatever on it is super easy to do, right? So we're going to have that same kind of thing with a Kubernetes cluster, with a whatever you want to run your containers on. That same problem, that same thing has to be in place. The ones that are super beneficial are those small, quick little apps. And when you get a developer that wants to sit at home on the couch and build a thing and run a container locally on his laptop and then check it out and check it into the big environment, that's way easier to do because you're just controlling source code and not like all of the data that's got to go around with it.
I like how you're drawing the parallels in how the environments are similar, and because you're not wrong. I like that. Okay, so let's take the next step. Do you feel that it will become the majority? So my workloads on my network, my home lab, will they mostly be running out of containers in 5 years, or will most of them still be on virtual machines with some containerization sprinkled in?
I'm running all of my containers on virtual machines.
Yeah, well, you don't hold up the weirdo as the standard. I'm just kidding.
I think it's going that way. The infrastructure that you need in place to run a VM, right? So I'm going to say this, but the infrastructure I need on my machine to be able to run a VM and deploy an OVA or whatever for testing is much different than being able to say, here's this Docker config file and I've got all the Docker stuff stood up and I can just run it. Right? That deployment process and the barrier to entry there is a little higher, I think, with the vSphere environment, because at the core of it, you don't need Kubernetes. You don't need the management and the orchestration tools to run containers.
But it's one of those things that you want, if you have the chance to start from scratch, you want that visibility and that management and that orchestration, or else you're trying to herd cats, right?
Yeah. There's nothing to actually do that work for you, so you got to build it, you got to manage it, you got to do it yourself. For most people, I think that's not that bad. I'm in that boat right now. I'm not actually using any orchestration tools. I'm just running all my stuff natively on the VM that runs it.
I feel like you are, I don't know if you're a unique person. Of course, you're a unique personality, Mr. Cozzolino, but I do feel like you can be effed, can be bothered, to use a phrase, that you don't mind getting in the juice for
so I think that kind of goes back to the like, what are we talking about with the lab, right? We talk about, hey, we're going to rebuild the lab and we've got all of these plans. We're going to write it as code. We're going to do infrastructure as code. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. You realize what that implies that we're going to do is we're going to actually have to sit down and not just build it.
And not just build it. I know, and that is against my against
and
my nature.
I want to because I can just do it and it'll be done.
But, and yes, and I will make a point to say I'm not arguing for that. I know what you're saying, and you're not wrong either. It's that's where my default goes, but I want to and I'm willing to force the alternative.
So I'm willing to take the time to do it and invest that isn't that, hey, I'm on board with this. I look at it and I go, oh my God, why is this so bloody complicated? Oh, right, I'm working on being a better operations guy and making everything coded and being reproducible. So to do that, I have to solve this problem this way.
And listen, I can only be truly informed if I've gone through it myself, not because somebody else has told me, or even if I've read something. The proof's in the pudding, really, and that's what I'm really looking forward to achieving and gaining, is that firsthand experience. So, are we doing this soon? I'm ready. Can we just install it, Matt? Can we just go?
Sure. Just build it. Build it all virtual, and then we'll pick it up and move it because it's already codified, right?
Well, no, I'm looking forward to that as we get, a lot of our education classes have labs built into them. Basically, all of them, I believe, and those need to be repeatable and deployable at the drop of a hat. This can't be, hey, Matt, I'm running a VDI training, this next week. Can you get me 12 desktops fully provisioned? And even if you're talking clones, that's the easy part, provisioning accounts and making sure, all of this other stuff. And this is going to be really fun to be able to, what are we going to leverage? We're going to leverage some Ansible, some Terraform, I'm guessing.
Those are the ones I'm looking at.
Because we need to do nested ESXi and things like that too.
Yep, and we're going to have some NSX in there so we can have consistent networking so everyone gets their same address. How do we want to bring users in is a whole conversation we need to do. Where are we checking our code into?
Give me a YAML, right? It's probably what you'll say to your consumer.
That's, I think, what it's going to end up being, but then everyone else that uses it has to be some level of comfortable with it.
Either that or it's a web form that dumps it into a YAML on the back end. Possibly.
Something.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many questions. Who builds that web form? How do we manage the web hosting? How do we collect that data? How do we right?
We were talking about possibly doing this in the cloud. I know that discussion got kicked in internally. I believe one of the concerns was who's gonna make sure that things are turned off when they should be. And because I have a very modest presence in Azure that I do some stuff in, so I keep my chops sharp, and I always check the billing every month just to see, hey, what's that look like? Because the VPNs are like $30 a month, just things like that, right? And I go and I had it wasn't blow the doors off, but it was more than I expected. I go, well, one, it's the cloud, but where'd that come from? And I looked, I had a VM that wasn't deallocated. Oops. Me, one VM, and I like to consider myself on top of this kind of stuff. And so I couldn't imagine. I just said, listen, we have 2, 3 classes running at one time. Somebody screws up. I mean, people make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. That could be a very hefty monthly bill.
Yeah, it could.
Unless somebody sees that. And then there's the concern of how many people have a workload that runs right down the middle of the road? Chances are you've got something custom, something that needs a weird requirement, something that just the cookie cutter things just don't give you the flexibility. And, we can do all that except for this one thing. Oh, shoot, well, that's critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we worry about being enough into the weeds where the flexibility to us is something that we just need.
Yeah.
And you can't get more flexible than running your own kit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the options come with their benefits and drawbacks. The one I come back to when I talk to customers is, if we've got this project is going to take X amount of time, and we can do a bunch of that planning up front and prep and getting ready for and all of that stuff, and then come cut over, we push a couple of buttons and it just works. Or we can kind of, shoot from the hip, half-ass it at the beginning, and come cut over, we've got all of this cleanup to do. I feel like at the end of the day, it all takes about the same amount of time, and it's just how much stress and effort do you put into it before you actually do it or after. So do we go cloud? Do we go on-prem? All of those things, I look at that and I zoom out and I say, it's going to be a bunch of work. It's going to be this kind of work or that kind of work.
Well, that's one of the things that in talking a lot with my customers, and a lot of my customers are operations folks, so we're talking the same language here in that I've heard some C-level execs or managers or VPs say, "Oh, I it's in the cloud now, so that's a FTE that I don't need."
It's just a whole other set of problems.
It's not. Things aren't magic up there. I mean, yeah, you might not need to patch hardware or worry about your firmware, and if it's Office 365, yeah, you don't have to patch Exchange anymore. How much time does that really consume of your staff? And it's minuscule. But the apps themselves need management. They need to run.
You're just shuffling that work around.
You're just sliding the puck around the ice just to a different zone for sure. I'm not even a hockey fan. Did that reference play? That was pretty good.
Sure,
I think.
I like it.
I'm going to check with Shane, our resident hockey fan, and Canuck. Yeah, if you want to go there, our friends to the north, and he might check me on that. Anything else going on with you, Matt?
I'm getting a surprising amount of snow up here in North Bend.
I'm jealous.
I am and not. I got some grumpy texts this morning about having to drive in it, but it's kind of nice.
I relish the opportunity to drive in snow.
It's the shoveling. The shoveling is super hard. That's not the best.
Side note, this is not IT related, obviously, but every time I shovel or dig with a snow shovel or dig with a ground shovel, about 2 days later, I get a 3-day knot under my left shoulder blade. And I'm not talking necessarily lifting hundreds of pounds or whatever. There's just something about my technique that puts me into an injury state for about 3 days after that. It's bad. But yeah, so...
you gotta be careful. Lift with your back.
I'll just call you.
Lift with your back and don't twist, right?
Lift with my back. Okay.
I will say, if you're gonna shovel the driveway, do it when it first falls.
Oh yeah.
I took the truck in and out, and we had some nice big frozen tire marks that were just a pain in the butt to shovel.
Well, it's that too, but then if you get any kind of moisture on top of that, any rain, that slush is
huge
very heavy. Very heavy. Yeah, I'm not even talking about freezing, but it's just like just a slop. Yeah. Yep. Okay, well, I hope where you are or wherever you are listening that you've got 70 degrees and sunny. That's my wish for you, but
and a sand beach.
It's a little ways off here.
It's getting there. Think about it.
Hey, so if you're still hanging around with us here, I do have to ask. I do have to implore you to give us a 5-star review on iTunes. I mean, what else are you doing right now? I mean, don't do that if you're driving in the car, but yeah, sure. We would love a review. We'd love some props, some 5 stars, thumbs up. Very much appreciated. If you have something you want us to talk about, do reach out to us. It's podcast@ivoxy.com. You can also hit us up at datacentertherapy.com as well. We're available wherever fine podcasts are listed. Hit that subscribe button, or as my niece says, smash that subscribe button. I think that's the terminology with the youngins.
Smash the like and hit
smash the like and hit subscribe. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. So, yes, please do. For Mr. Cozzolino, I am Matt Yeti. Thanks again for listening to Data Center Therapy. Have a great day.